So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend a bit of time with the panel here exploring some of the topics in a bit more detail. The theme of today is all around practicality. So, and we've got, I'll let Adrian and Andrew introduce themselves in a second. Obviously, Alfred and Sartaj don't need introductions. They've already done that. And between the panel here, I think we've got some incredible breadth across this topic, which is going to be fantastic. So, why don't I start? Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Xeni. I'm better known as the founder of Nobody's Child, which is a responsible ladies wear brand, Fabicus and Soweto, which are two technology businesses. One is a referral technology for e-commerce, and the other one is fundamentally a data play that we're going to touch on today. And so, yeah, I have the privilege or misfortune of straddling retail and tech concurrently, which was self-inflicted pain that I embarked on realistically about 8 years ago now when we started this journey.
And I'm Adrian Blair, CEO of Trustpilot, which is the world's largest open customer feedback platform.
Thank you. Right, if I may start some questions. We started this morning around the topic of visibility and invisibility. So if I can start, Sartaj, with you and then ask the rest of the panel to contribute. I was fascinated by the invisibility aspect of what you were talking about, the fact that websites, well-known, well-resourced websites can just be invisible. You did touch on some practical things in your presentation, things to avoid. Is there anything else, and where might people do and what might they use to try and really ascertain how visible they are today?
Sure. I think to answer this question, I would probably start by saying you have to sort of contextualize what visibility and invisibility means. When you ask questions to these models, there are a bunch of different types of ways you can formulate those questions. The way I like to think about it is like a purchase funnel in a way, right? Let's say we're focusing on commerce-related questions. Your brand is not going to be invisible at the bottom of the funnel if there's some sort of comparison going on, right? So I think, like, from a discovery perspective, if you were to ask a question like, what are the best running shoes? And your site, one, doesn't provide helpful information to answer that question. Say you're a large retailer, you are going to be invisible. And what that means is you won't be cited in the response, or your product won't show up in the answer itself. Some other things I would say are, I think that when thinking about like what you do on your own site, we actually see that like the biggest lifts that you can get are actually from things you do off site. Around 20% of all the citations that we see are actually from earned media. And so you want to think about like, okay, like if I'm sort of working in the sportswear industry, what are the large media outlets that I can go and talk to and provide helpful information to? And I think like that's probably where I would start. There are a couple other like on-site tactics you can employ, but for the most part, creating blogs is probably the largest, highest ROI thing you can do as a site to show up in this new era.
And then obviously you talked about social proof communities, which is probably a good way to, I suppose, flip to you, Adrian, in terms of the role of social proof as a place where AI will go to help make decisions. So what is the sort of Trustpilot view? Where are you seeing this going?
So absolutely right. You know, the central role of social proof. I mean, I think what we've seen is LLM citation has gone from being something of a niche interest a couple of years ago to something incredibly material. You know, there's around 1 billion people on Earth now using large language models to find information, and a huge amount of that is with commercial intent. So it's people researching either purchases or, you know, which gas company to choose or which bank to choose or whatever aspect of commerce it might be. So it is now no longer a sort of niche interest. It is essential for any successful business to figure out how they are showing up and how they're going to show up better. What we see is the LLMs love social proof. And I think the reason they do is that it plays to various aspects of how the LLMs have been built. So first of all, they love recent content. So if your stuff is stale, it's 6 months, a year old, they will just regard it as inherently less interesting. Secondly, they're very interested in the long tail. So, I worked for many years back in the day at Google, and, typical Google search queries were, 3-4 words long. What even Google is seeing now is queries are getting much, much longer and more specific. And obviously in LLMs, people can type a context window of many, many tens of thousands of characters if they want to. What that means is, to be the best LLM, whether you're Gemini or ChatGPT or whoever, you need to have the information that lets you answer that very specific query that the user has. And that means the long tail of content becomes incredibly important. So, on Trustpilot, we have about 350 million reviews of businesses around the world. We get about 200,000 new ones every day. And what we see is the businesses who have a very large quantity of reviews, it's not all about the star rating and, are they 5-star or 1-star? If you've got a very large quantity of reviews, then you are more likely to have the information that the LLM is going to want. And then when you combine that with our own domain authority, because Trustpilot is, we were cited in January as being the 5th most cited domain globally across all the LLMs. So the LLMs view Trustpilot as being a kind of authoritative domain. So having that long tail, large quantity of reviews, real humans, recency, all of that is what the LLMs sort of prize, and that's how we're helping many, many thousands of businesses to show up better.
Fantastic. And Andrew, if I can switch to you, obviously partly with your retailer hat, but probably more importantly with the Fabicus hat on, in terms of data. So we talked to, Adrian was talking about social proof, a form of rich data that the LLMs use. What would you add from your experience at Fabicus and some of the other related data, traceability data, authenticity? What are you seeing, and where are you investing in to help brands and consumers who are using LLMs to find the right products?
I suspect the role we're playing is primarily around preempting. This will inevitably, like everything, become a level playing field. Everyone will get good at it or better at it. I think aside from trusted and structured data, it's also about how rich that data is. So what we do at Fabicus is we've got 2 swim lanes in our business, philosophically the same problem, but addressing 2 very different customer profiles. One is IP owners, licensors, who license their IP out and the products are produced by third parties. So helping them build a structured system of record that can be trusted in the workflow is one thing, but also to work more closely with the retail landscape. You think about today, if the licensors themselves cannot identify their own legitimate licensed products, when it comes to the machines, the agents, it completely falls over. So what we're doing is we've played a pretty fundamental role in that community of both the licensor and licensee, but also the big partners, so the big marketplaces, the big AI platforms, to get us established as an authoritative source of being able to create a verifiable record of a product, so that when somebody looks for a Mickey Mouse t-shirt, what they're finding is a legitimate Mickey Mouse t-shirt. Because at the moment, if the licensor doesn't have that structured data, then the agents have got no chance, which exposes the consumers. In retail, we're doing the same, but with a richer data attribution around the compliance of the product. So, we could take a t-shirt and we'll have over 200 attributes, from the traceability to the composition, to the wash, to the durability, to the test and integrity. It's a very, very deep data set. We've used that to enable implementation and scalable digital product passports, just to meet a regulatory requirement. But fundamentally, what we've ended up with as a byproduct is an incredibly rich data set for our products that can be used to drive optimization. And so we find ourselves in a world now where, even though regulation was a nice tailwind, I mean, it was a complete godsend when Google announced their UCP a couple of weeks ago, because now we've got more people educating brands and retailers on the importance of structured and trusted data. I mean, Sartaj, I talked about that briefly upstairs, that one of the biggest challenges we've been on this journey for nearly 6 years, is educating the landscape on the importance of that data in the first place, let alone the benefits and utilities. And so AI has been an incredible evolution, which is now driving a little bit more sense of urgency. But the role that we want to play is becoming a trusted system of record that actually feeds that beast quite nicely. It has a dependency on what we do. And we've, without breaching any sensitivities too prematurely, we've managed to establish all of those relationships of global magnitude to really drive value to our clients. Does that address the question?
Yep. I mean, trust is obviously a word that's coming up a lot in this conversation in the context of AI. So I'm going to maybe open it up to all of you on this topic of trust. Data is clearly a big foundation, whether that's social proof, whether that's product and other data around the authenticity. But my question is, what are the things, again, with the practical theme, what are the things today that people in this audience should be doing to set up the foundations for a trusted environment that AI is going to use, is question one. And question two, what does the future look like? How is this going to evolve? Clearly, trust is important. How much more important is it going to be in the context of agentic commerce? So two elements of the question. So, because I know that many of you would comment on all of those. Who would like to have a view on that? Adrian?
Stab, yeah. I mean, I think it's worth breaking down, why trust is so important to businesses, right? Because most business people, if you say, is trust important in your business, they'll say yes. And in fact, they often say it's the most important thing to whatever industry they're in. But a customer who trusts you, let's just think about how different they are from one who doesn't, right? They're more likely to spend more with you. They're more likely to be loyal to you and not go after your competition. And they're more likely to recommend you to a friend. Or to people they know. So the economic value, the lifetime value of the customer that has high trust is orders of magnitude greater than one who doesn't, pretty much regardless of which type of business, which industry you're in. And how does trust get built? I don't think that's changed a lot in the age of AI. Like the fundamentals, what do people want to see in order to trust a business? Well, there's really three things. One is they want to see transparency. So they want to see that you're clean and open about what is going on. Secondly, they want you to be credible. They want to see that you're making promises and delivering on your promises. So you're actually good at what you do. And thirdly, they want to be treated with respect. They want to be treated as individuals, not as part of a group, and they want to be respected as an individual. So the question is, those are the fundamental things you have to do to build trust. Now, how does AI change the nature of how those things work in businesses? And I think it does quite profoundly, because you've gone from a world where businesses could kind of broadcast this information one to many, to a world where the AI tools are picking up all the signals they can from around the web, from all the different data sources they have access to. So the way in which trust is getting built these days, the fundamentals remain the same, but the sort of mechanisms by which trust gets built are very different now in the age of AI to how they used to be. Obviously, Trustpilot, that is something we are really building into our product to structure the data in a way that the LLMs can read it easily, they can train on it, they can understand it, so that we're helping businesses engage transparently, out in the open, in a personal way with people. And that's what ultimately builds trust.
Can I build on that a little bit? Because obviously trust is something that we've leveraged as a brand. So if I put my nobody's child hat on for a minute, one of the things, just to give context to the group, because not a lot of people have heard of our brand, we're a responsible ladies wear. We use the word responsible because I don't believe you can be sustainable as a fashion brand. I think it's a contradiction. And so we sort of banned that terminology early on. But what we've done is, so it's in the public domain, so I'm not breaching any sensitivities, of course. I sold a third of the business to Marks & Spencer's 5 years ago. We were their first ever minority investment. We were the first third party brand on that platform, and we've grown that business over 5 years from about 1.8 million to we'll do about 180 million in gross revenue this year. And the fundamental DNA of our brand is around transparency, authenticity, honesty. And we implemented digital product passports. I am a geek at heart, and I love tech, but equally, I look at things objectively as a retailer in terms of commercial value and making sure that it's right for the business and the team and everything else. But I saw the value in digital product passports about 3 years ago, when the regulation was being formed, very blurred at the time, and they're slowly polishing that diamond. But we wanted to pioneer. Why? Because it was a great opportunity for us as a brand to tell our customers at individual unit level everything about that product to build trust. Now, what I can attribute to that, not entirely because that's not true, but definitely a proportion of our basket value online has gone from 36 to 124 because we've elevated the brand. Our returning customers moved from about 1.8 to 2.3 times a year. And we're already seeing we're finally viable and profitable. We have been for 3 years, thank God. But that aside, it was because the market was shifting and we had to change our positioning. And the way that we changed that positioning, of course, was by quality and price. They're obviously still the most sensitive decision drivers for consumers. But fundamentally, what we're recognized for in that honesty and transparency, and the digital product passports for us, I'm proud to say we've now implemented across all of our products in our last autumn winter collection, and that is now the standard for us moving forward. And what that has done, we've had people go into stores to ask to see it. So I think people misconstrue the power of trust quite a lot, and the implications on loyalty and therefore the commercial value. We've as a brand, we've seen incredible growth and continue to thankfully experience that growth. But I absolutely attribute some of those fundamentals. Now, just to contradict the AI element a little bit, coming back from NRF, having bombarded with agentic commerce in every shape and form, I was on the plane and I had a realization that what's about to happen is we're going to have a new channel to market on digital that's going to create another swim lane that we need to monitor, invest in. It's going to dilute, it's going to drive costs of digital inevitably. And so the first thing I did when I landed is meet with my CEO and tell her to accelerate stores, which sounds bizarre. She couldn't believe it because I've been opposing it for the last 3 years, really. And so I signed off another 6 stores immediately, 3 that we've just signed the lease and another 3 that will follow, just to make sure that in the next 12 to 18 months, as the pendulum keeps swinging, we're covered from a blended perspective. And there is a direct correlation between your online transactions and your physical presence in those regions. We've seen that, and I've validated that many a times in different sizes. So AI is fundamental to the evolution. The way that we're seeing how people are shopping is important, but it is also easy to get carried away and lose sight sometimes of the fundamentals, which is the physical and the experience, the brand positioning, the authenticity, and leveraging as many of those tools as you can. And we're quite proudly pushing that envelope. I just wanted to add that extra colour.
If I may add to the conversation, beautiful. I think it also starts internally to have that authenticity and to have that transparency and to have that respect for your people. So I love that, yeah.
I mean, internally we did something, and I resisted the temptation of asking questions, by the way, because I loved both of what you covered, but I didn't want to bore people with repetition. I sat down with my mindset. So I really struggled with Nobody's Child to get them to adopt AI even as a thing, for 2 reasons. One, bandwidth, thankfully, because they're growing and they're stretched. I appreciate that. 2, just culturally, they didn't understand the potential of AI, truly, but also because we're a responsible brand, some of the ethical and moral positions, right? We don't want to create fake people. We feel quite strongly about that. And there's a whole load of other stuff that my team are quite passionate about. And I don't want to disrupt that because I built the DNA of the business sort of when we founded it 10 years ago and really over the last 7, 8 years. And they carried a torch incredibly well without my input now, because that thankfully has continued to grow. But what I did about 4 or 5 months ago is I sat with the business and made it very clear, we're going to continue to grow. And I'm quite passionate about doing that. And I'm very proud of that. And I don't want to lose people. I don't want to replace people, right? So whilst there is a lot of noise around the impact of AI, all I said to them is, right, here's the challenge. We're going to grow the business. We're going to double it again in the next 18 to 24 months. My commitment is that none of you go because of AI. Your commitment is I don't need to add people to get that growth. So let's use AI to drive efficiencies because there's loads. Let's be very clear. Let's be very focused. Let's land and expand. We're not going to try and boil the ocean. And if we can do that successfully together, then all of a sudden we're all benefiting from it. And that shift has been incredible. I can tell you in the last, Christmas aside, of course, because we do give them 2 weeks off. But that aside, I'm seeing it sprout like mushrooms all over my organization. Different tools, different applications, different workshops, even how proactive the team are being in going to events and listening and learning has been incredibly refreshing because they were in a little cocoon. They were petrified of the impact. So I think that communication and how it lands with the team to really adopt it and embrace it is also critical.
And that both addressed the fear that people had, but also the reward, right, for them. So brilliant. I love that.
No choice.
Is there anything else, Sartaj, you'd like to add on? Brilliant, by the way, Andrew, just in terms of flipping into your other hat as a retailer and seeing the practical things, the environment that you create inside the business to avoid that fear and to take advantage of it in a appropriate way. I'm just going to flip to Sartaj. Anything else you would add around? Well, we're on the subject of data trust. We've touched on, like Andrew and Alfred, on how you create the culture, but from a technology and data perspective.
I'm coming at it from a different perspective where we at Profound are sort of analyzing this from a more third-party lens. And the company was founded in 2024, so we're very AI native in that sense. I think a lot of from like a technology perspective, a lot of the way that you create trust with that an LLM is trying to create trust with the user is by pulling in and amalgamating a bunch of different sources, as opposed to, as you were saying, doing one-to-many. It's pulling in a bunch of sources that include a lot of real human reviews, real human perspectives. Right now, I think that there are ways to gamify the system, but you certainly don't want to do that in the long term. We actually have seen that there was a site, which I won't name, maybe 2025, mid 2025, that shot up in citations, insane amount of citations across the board, across all of the prompts that we're tracking. But when you actually go and look at that site, it's kind of like a shell website that was just sort of pumping out content, hundreds of thousands of articles a day. And it shot up to be top 10 most cited source in LLMs. And it wasn't providing
AI generated articles.
It was basically an AI that was generating articles, posting them on a website, and then ChatGPT was going and citing those pages. But eventually, OpenAI figured it out, and that site is nowhere to be found anymore. And so I think that, a lot of these LLM providers are actually thinking about, okay, how can we, one, provide the most helpful recommendation to the user, but also ingest information that's actually high quality. That's what I would say.
I mean, if I can just add, I think that's exactly why this concept of domain authority is so important to the LLMs, right? Because we at Trust we have an entire team of people whose job it is to make sure that that kind of stuff is not happening on Trustpilot. We took off last year 7.8 million fake reviews off our platform, so we're incredibly proactive about looking for all the signals in the data that tell us something shouldn't be there and taking it off. But the result of that is we kind of get around that problem. If the LLM's not knowing what to trust, they look for content on authoritative domains.
Great. Well, look, let's switch now a little bit into the future. So, Sartaj, you painted some really interesting charts of how you can see some very clear trend lines. You touched on agentic commerce. So this is not just humans discovering and making choices, but machines potentially shopping. If I can start with you, can you give a bit more color to, let's say, the next 12 to 18 months? And particularly if, again, with the practical bent on this, right? What should people be doing and what are the first steps they should be doing to prepare for a world where their websites might be have agentic shoppers on them?
Well, I think first 12 to 18 months in this world is a very long time. In the last, 14 months, we saw it went from basically nothing to there's now a shopping carousel in each of the models. You can go and click and buy things that it recommends. It'll show you, like on the website, that the referrer was ChatGPT, so we can actually track that, and we see that's increasing exponentially. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to shift towards being, I touched on this in what I was saying, like truly agentic. What I mean by that is, Google has introduced this thing called UCP. There are a couple of things that they've called mandates, which is basically like a cryptographic signature that, you tell the LLM to do something, it'll store that information. So you say, I want to buy this pair of shoes if it drops below $140 on eBay. It'll store that information with the signature that you authorized it to buy, and it'll just do it for you. I think that's happening in the next 3 to 6 months. I think after that, the shopping products are going to be built out far more robustly. We see that, at least for OpenAI, they are basically asking retailers to send them their product feeds every 15 minutes to keep them updated. And you want to make sure, some practical advice, there are a lot of optional fields. They're not optional. You definitely, if you offer products and you're selling products on your website, you want to fill out every single one of those fields in detail, and make sure that it's updated every 15 minutes, which is their max limit. I think that the like user experience is going to be not totally website-less in 12 to 18 months, but I would imagine that I know that I'm going to be just transacting through the models themselves. Like I envision a world where you ask for something, it recommends it to you, you click buy, it's on its way to your house. I think that poses a pretty large risk to a lot of companies who aren't going to show up there, because if they're not ever going to, it's almost like you don't even know what's out there, right? If you're going to trust the model with the recommendation that it provides and buy in the platform, you're not going to go do any sort of external research or sort of searching at all. And this is where trust comes in as well, right? Like you need to make sure that if you're a model provider, that the recommendation that you're providing actually is going to be helpful, and the user's going to want to buy that product and continue buying products and services from you. And that's core to their business model, I think.
Anyone on the panel want to add anything else? Any other perspectives?
In that environment, what's happening to trust is it's becoming embedded in the agents. So the agents themselves need to take a view on where to buy from, and they are then doing a lot of the same kind of research activity that you would do as a human today. So the trust is kind of getting embedded. We think of the concept of trust being embedded across all agents. So they need this kind of layer of trust to tap into, and that's something that we're starting to see, like the amount of agentic activity on our platform, citing, collecting the content, collecting the feedback, and we are very keen at Trustpilot to be open to that. We don't see ourselves, we are a destination website, sure, a lot of people visit it, but we get far more reach off platform than we do on platform. So that's the kind of future that we're trying to embrace.
One additional comment from my side, I think in the agentic commerce world, differentiating yourself from others are becoming more important. So you need to be clear on what makes your product different from everybody else. And if you're not clear on that, either for yourself or on your website or for your customers, then it's going to be even harder for an agent to know why yours rather than somebody else's. So make sure you've got that differentiation clear.
Do we know what the predicted traffic is going to be in the next 12 to 18 months coming through agentic commerce?
I'm not sure about the traffic numbers on the commercial side, but I think that, Gemini is at 600 million monthly active users right now. ChatGPT is at 900 million weekly users. I think the commercial number, I think the percent, I ran some data on this a little while back. The commercial queries are roughly 10 to 15% right now of all the searches that are happening on the platform. The interesting thing is that we see that in those commercial queries, they're actually like the model is going and hitting the web for like sources 50% of the time, as opposed to 17% overall. So I think it'll be. I think that commercial number is going to continue to increase.
So we're saying 12 to 18 months, 20% of transactions are executed.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. So if anyone wants to buy Nobody's Child by Christmas, then I've got to get out. I try to have a composed view with things like this, right? Because we've been bombarded with everything, and I constantly track evolution, consumer behavior. This is also generational. My customer, unfortunately, is a lot older. So we fight as a brand to have younger customers, like every brand does, but that blend across our channel partners means that the average age is a lot older. I think the penetration for us is a little bit safer, but definitely I'm not naive enough to believe that we're protected fully, especially for the longer term health of the business. But I am intrigued also when you start to boil it down to which category. It's a lot easier to buy fairy liquid or toilet paper using an agent than it is a top that fits you and looks. So I think people have to look at it through different lens. I mean, I know we've used running shoes as an example significantly this morning. I'm 20 stone with flat feet. It's really hard work to run. So when I can, and I enjoy it at times, but when I buy trainers, I have to put so much more effort and time into it. So I think I just like to keep a perspective on it from a brand's perspective. You do, unfortunately, in the current world, have to do everything. You have to prepare for this, you have to get better. I loved the presentation earlier. It was really informative. I've really struggled to really connect all the dots between this is the future state and this is where we are and what do we need to do to get there and how can it be done in a way that we can integrate into our business, into our ways of working, so that in 6 to 12 months, all of our product listings are as descriptive as possible, as authoritative as possible, as trusted as possible, as verifiable as possible. And then we leverage our brand equity and the PR around the brand to try and drive our discoverability where we can. I'm intrigued to see whether this will actually become a 20% proportion of transactions online or not. We have to prepare for that, but I think there's still a few unknowns.
I think there is a danger that those of us who work in tech start to believe that the rest of the world are a bit like us. And the truth is, yes, of course, agentic commerce, there's a place for it. But engineers in Silicon Valley were telling us that the high street was going to die out because the internet could get a SKU from A to B, and that's because for them, shopping is not an experience, right? Shopping is just an efficient way of getting a product. For a lot of people, shopping is the experience, right? They want to go out and they want to browse and they want to look at things. I think the same is true of the web. I like to think browsing your websites is part of the experience that people like, and they're not just going to want the SKU to be delivered and never see your site because they were on ChatGPT or whatever.
I hope so. I mean, just to clarify one of the points made earlier, the direct correlation between having a physical store in a town and the traffic that increases there. And equally, when you close a store, you lose online traffic in that area. And that is, and I have a referral technology business, so we leverage the statement of 80% of transactions are still referral based. We've just digitized it. But I believed in that before. All of us will buy off of a friend or family that's recommended something. I know now it's shifting with AI, people using that as a source. It's a lot quicker, a lot more comprehensive. So I do absolutely understand that. But that also tells you about local market, right? When you've got a store and someone goes in and they socialize, they see their friends on the weekend, and it will naturally drive brand awareness around a physical location. And that's the bit that we've wanted to drive. Our brand is in over 400 doors. We've just got into 120 doors in the US. I only have 7 of my own stores. I have a pretty good physical and digital blend, but I naturally want to own that experience. There's a lot of other benefits associated with your own store. So we're accelerating that now to 18 stores. But I'm always looking at it through this sort of holistic lens of the impacts of agentic, the way people are discovering products, how do we want to do that? We want to be best in class online. We also want to deliver an amazing physical experience. And so I just see a much more complex way of retailing over the next 12 to 18 months because of this evolution, because all the old stuff doesn't disappear yet. You've still got to man all of those towers. It's just a new tower that needs love and attention.
Right, we've got, thank you. So I think we've covered a lot of ground. I want to give the opportunity for the audience to ask the panel some questions. So, lots of hands shooting up. I'm going to go over here. So, right, Andrew, question.
For SEO, our kind of broad approach has always been you get content, you get backlinks to the content, and then at the same time you're doing kind of brand mentions and stuff. I haven't heard any of you mention backlinks. I heard you mention domain authority, and it seemed to be all about content, trusted content, variety of content. But you also mentioned that they have an index that's separate but overlapping with Google, and I wondered how backlinks, domain authority, and that index come together in the new world.
Yeah, I think my answer to that would be backlinks are less important in this new era, but they still play a role in sort of a different way. You want to rank highly on Google itself to get to sort of be indexed in that overlap with the models. And so backlinks will play a role in sort of like a second degree way. I think it's not important in terms of like the content itself that gets cited directly, because a backlink doesn't provide any extra, like the model is not going to go and one visit that link. The count of the links may help you rank higher in Google. And so I think my recommendation is always it's like content. Everything is content, the quality of the content and helpfulness. And sort of like, are you reverse engineering the prompts that you want to show up for is where you should spend the vast majority of your time.
Thank you.
Lots of questions. David.
Just going back to, I completely agree with you about the being able to buy things offline, because I think there's an emotion to buying fashion that I think agentic commerce is really going to struggle with. But just a question for you again, sorry, on the, you talk about agentic coming in 12 to 18 months. You had Claude do an advert during Super Bowl saying we'll never have brands or sponsored ads on our websites. Sponsors going to come in there. Where's the trust? Where's the trust going to come from someone there when they think they're going to be sold something to they haven't necessarily bought and they just make a decision on? What's your thought on that?
You're talking about ads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's coming. It started, hasn't it?
Yeah, it started 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
On
think
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT USA. Yeah.
I think it's tough, right? The way to do it, the way that you do that in a trustworthy way is going to come down to the way they present that information. Like, I think there's a world where I'm sure they could totally just slide it under and include it in the answers, but I think from the sort of early previews that they've shown, they have a separate box that they're going to show.
If they're doing all the shopping for you, you're trusting them to go and do it from a sponsored ad that you've had no control over. And that's what there's going to be a trust element there, isn't there?
I think, I think that in this world right now where you don't have that agentic shopper, the trust of the ads is less of a problem. I imagine there'll be some sort of like flag that you can employ on your agent to sort of avoid any sort of sponsored content, but then that creates a problem. So it's a good question. I think it could be, that could be a problem.
So, question. How do you think brands and retailers are going to deal with consumer loyalty through agentic shopping? To your example on Puma, if I ask my AI agent to buy those trainers when they hit $1.5, I may not be stipulating which retailer or / directly from brand or marketplace it comes from, and all of a sudden, potentially my shopping behaviour has become very much about price and availability rather than loyalty with a particular brand or retailer.
Well, I think don't underestimate how smart these agents are going to get, right? And, the phrase we always use in tech is, the way it is today is the worst it will ever be, right? So when you look at all the developments in, chip technology and models and all the rest, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, it's going to be dramatically better. And I think these agents will be extremely smart and they will understand your personal preferences, including things like which loyalty programs are you a member of? And one of the things that we're keen to do at Trustpilot is give people the ability to review the agents when they come along, so that you can pick and choose based on what other people are saying about the agent. So if the agent is doing a great job and picking up on all your personal preferences and loyalty programs and all of that, you'll be able to tell others that, you know, this is a particularly good one to choose. So I think the agents are going to get far, far smarter.
I think we've got so much history on consumer data around loyalty as well, the way that women and men shop in particular. Women are not necessarily loyal to a brand. They'll have a handful of brands that they love and they'll shop quite freely. They have to love it and then they'll buy it. Whereas men, we find a pair of jeans that fits and a t-shirt, we go there twice a year, we buy every colour in the same size and we're happy until the next 6 months. And that pattern has been forever, right? That's been recurring, and it's been, we know, it's just interesting. And I'm actually really torn with this. I don't know the answer to this, but we talk about apparel. Let's use the word apparel for a minute and use the word fashion separately. Apparel is buying the stuff that we put on. Fashion is when we care what we look like. The reality is probably 75-80% of the population are not as fussed as what they look like as that other 20% who are really conscious about having the latest or the new colours and trends and stripes and stars or whatever that may be. So I think that's the risk where agentic will take an authoritative role. I need something, just get me. I need some fresh t-shirts, go and get me the 3-4. That's okay. If you're looking for an evening dress as a woman, you want to see what actually exists. The agents will present you with information. You will make an informed decision based on when you see it and you feel it. Or you're going to buy it, and as we already know, send half of it back, right? We're already experienced and we're good, but we're still just over 50% returns. But dresses go up to 70% for some brands. And if it's evening wear, okay, slightly skewed because of bridesmaids patterns, it's up to 80%. It's never going to be viable. It's impossible to be commercially viable and sustain that level of behavior, right? So there's a whole load of other things that need consideration in how consumers shop is one thing, how they return, what they like, what they don't like, their affinity to brands. There are so many ingredients that will play a role. Technology is fundamental to trying to boil it down, but it's still a very complex landscape to navigate as a retailer, as a brand. And of course, I can sit with 6 different people in my team and have 6 different problems, ultimately with the same thing, which is to try and sell more product and how we do it.
Brilliant. Julian, you had a question.
Yeah, just want to come back to Andrew's point about physical retail experience. I'm really encouraged to hear that you're expanding. I know Andrew and I were at a Capgemini event last week where they shared a really interesting statistic, something in the order of 60% shopping missions involve some form of engagement with AI, but at the same time, there's been a 20+% lift in consumers' desire for physical retail experiences, which is a conundrum in consideration of what we're discussing. And I think the point you made that all of these shifts don't just start and overcome the others that are already trained, right? Social commerce is still lifting. TikTok, Insta, Facebook, we're all still investing in physical, digital, social. At the same time, we're now overlaying the impact and implications of agentic. My question is, in consideration of that and the future ahead, if you had a tenner to invest in an integrated channel strategy as a retailer, where should you be placing that tenner? How would you spread it on the roulette wheel of opportunities ahead? Just in proportional terms, your investable capital is limited in retail. Where should we be thinking about placing our bets?
So I'm going to answer that with my tech hat on for a minute, because this is a massive frustration. I do, and they're all on the market, by the way. So if you're in the market, we can have that conversation. Yeah, I can do dresses, tech, whatever you need. Now, on a more serious note, one of the things that I face into a lot as a vendor is this constant landscape of passion to build, right? So you're getting a lot of businesses that technology is not their core business, and they all have the ambition to build their own tools. They don't understand the problem. They're not going to be as fast. It's very complex. Building enterprise software, commercial grade, has been the bane of my life for the last 9 years, and learning that the hard way because I'd never done it before. So I'm happy to concede that. So I spent a fortune doing it myself, and I try and, when I'm speaking to our customers, do it with a level of conviction around, I've been through this pain, you don't need to do this, right? There is a very, very clear distinction between the house you want in your head and just letting a builder build it without the architecture plans, without the M&E, and without everything that goes with it. And so from a retailer perspective, the one thing I'm encouraging my team to do is don't get overexcitable in trying to do our own stuff. Let's learn from the best. Let's use the best. They're passionate about what they do. They're going to continue to be good. Not all of them. There is a lot of noise. There is still about 75% of it, which is nonsense. They all promise you the biggest ROIs in the world. Of course they do. And that's understandable. I get it. Everyone's just trying to make a living. But for my team, when we look at our budgets, we're bold, but we try and be efficient on making sure that we're investing in things that are going to drive equity value for my business. Building the best technology for my own business is a complete waste of money. And so I want to make sure that we're adopting the right tools, we're relevant. And so the big investments that we have made, and big in our world, not for obviously the larger scale, is structured data. Make sure it's complete, make sure it's trusted. And then understanding the utilities and benefits of having that structured data across a whole host of things. Now, DPPs were one of them. So we did the digital product passports, leveraging that same data set now for SEO, AEO, GEO, our own site in PDP, making sure that we leverage it, right? We've invested in it. Now let's go and get all the juice out of the fruit that we can, I think has been a pretty powerful, pivotal. That's a mindset thing. That's just from our own perspective as a retail brand. But I face into it obviously as a vendor.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm just conscious of time. So I know there are some other questions, but hopefully if people can stay on for a few minutes afterwards, I'm just going to do a wrap up because I want to keep us to time. And I also wanted to thank the panel here. I'm sure you'll agree. Give them a big hand because it's been amazing. A real 360-degree view on this topic. So thank you all. Right, I'm just going to finish off with just quickly get this. So I'm not going to go through this again, but I think we're all agreed. We've seen some amazing statistics, insights from the team, and Sartaj shared an awful lot of insights. There's a lot of change. The shift is going on. It's going quickly, right? We covered all of these areas. We covered visibility. We covered trust. I think there was a lot of conversations on trust. I think trust was one of the things that I learned is really pivotal here. We talked about how do you get ready, and the organisational aspects, really important. How do you keep pace with this? How do you create, like Andrew was saying, the right environment in the teams to take advantage of this, not be scared of it, all of that good stuff. I think there's some really practical lessons. So this event is all about not just learning, but how do you turn these things into action, right? So it's got a real practical bent. And I personally learned a ton of things from the speakers and the panel, some real good takeaways, real practical things that you can do right now. From a Net Solutions perspective, we are hosting this event. We want to support businesses in that journey. And how do we best support it? So we've created what we call a growth readiness diagnostic, right? So I wanted to make an offer to everyone here that we will do up to 5 free of charge diagnostics. And what the diagnostics will give you is an assessment of where you are against where you want to be, and to help you to build that roadmap. It's your decisions on how you prioritize, but just at least give you an assessment of that. And we look at 4 areas. We'll look at the commercial, what you want to achieve as a business, your visibility, that's obviously quite important. How do you get discovered? The data foundations. I think we all heard today how critical data is, how you expose it, how you use it. Andrew talked about how he's using data in so many different ways and investing. And then finally, of course, execution and operation. So how do you make it all work? How do the teams work? How do they leverage it? So we've developed this across these 4 pillars. It's a rapid assessment. It's not a huge investment of time. It's an interview-based thing, but you will get an actual deliverable out the end of it with, red, amber, green, and priorities, and we'll discuss with you how you want to use that. And here's an example of some of the output. So we'll rank things, and you can see it's designed to be a business-led engagement with a technology foundation. And if you want to take advantage of this, there's a QR code on your seat, and you can make a request, and we'd be delighted to work with you on this readiness diagnostic. And with that, unless there's any other questions, I think we are, I'll call this to a finish, and thank you all for attending, and thank you to our guests and speakers.